Welcome to the second part of our podcast sessions with Colin Sullivan on Microcredentials. If you missed the first part, check the link to it in the description. So microcredentials have been touted as tools for creating more equitable opportunities. Can you elaborate on how they can be leveraged so that people can access these?
Yeah, so I love this question. I think that I want to break down what do we mean by equity first, because I think that there's a couple of ways that microcredentials could be really intentionally used to build equity. And I think the first one is about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we know students and learners acquire on a campus that may not be recorded anywhere meaningful. We have a colleague, Keisha Campbell, who's from Morgan State University, and she gave an amazing podcast interview recently, and totally stealing and borrowing this from her, but it's so true. Basically, her point that she was making was you look at a 4.0 student versus a 2.5 student, right? And you think about what does that mean? But that 2.5 student, they may be working, they may have outside responsibilities that they have to take care of. They also may be involved in a student organization. They also may be involved in service learning opportunities. And that 4.0 student may just be going to class and maybe excelling and doing all those things. So on paper, that 4.0 student may be a more attractive candidate, right? But if you had the context of that 2.5 student and you knew that from their service learning experience, they were gaining X, Y, and Z competencies, they're thinking about, or they know how to make a budget, they know how to manage time. If you had more information, there actually may be more skills that are relevant from that other student than from the 4.0 student. So I think how microcredentials are building equity in that sense is that I think it's easy to write off that 2.5 student, right? And what microcredentials can do is, again, really reveal some of the context of their life that is making them present as a student in one way, but they actually are excelling in various different competencies, right? And that can be life-changing, right? Because again, if we're looking at someone who's applying to jobs and that employer is really, again, looking at the information that they have in front of them, the 4.0 student may be more attractive. But if I see a 2.5 student and I know exactly what competencies they have and I know exactly where they demonstrated them, I actually might give that 2.5 student, maybe I'll give them an interview, and that could be a door open that otherwise would not have been open for them. So I think that's a really important equity piece about microcredentials. And it goes back to microcredentials really being a tool for economic mobility, but there's just also a deeper sense of equitable skills or finding equity in the skills that we have. And I keep thinking back to our students from IT versus our arts and humanities students. And I think that we operate in an economy and a society that may value one skill set over another, but instead, let's just lay it all out on the table, right? Let's lay out all the skills everybody has, and we can determine and decipher from there. So again, I think that microcredentials can really help articulate the skills that people have in a way that makes more meaning and makes more sense, in a way that adds depth that we are often lacking right now, so that we actually end up conflating what a macro credential means and what skills someone brings because they have that macro credential.
Yeah, and it's all about attracting for employers. If you want to attract great candidates and you want to be able to see through what their skills and their knowledge bases are. But at the end of the day, for the person seeking this advancement, these jobs, these roles, really at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. You want to enhance your education. You want to learn and grow as a person. And if microcredential, it sounds like microcredentialing is that way to be able to, that stepping stone to be able to get that new knowledge base, that new mastery, so that you can then showcase that out there in the real world, in the workplace. And that's really what matters to people. At the end of the day, that's what people want. They want to be able to they want to be able to look great, not just on paper, but in that open, when that interview happens, that open door to be able to sell themselves and to be able to showcase their real value that they can bring to a workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I hope I'm conveying is thinking about microcredentials being able to capture those skills that are quote unquote marketable or have heightened relevance in the job market. And there's a lot of truth in that, right? But I also still want to acknowledge that there are so many experiences, and I'm thinking about general education courses that are really important for lifelong learning, for a robust liberal arts education, that may often feel to a student, why am I taking this? Why am I here, right? Like, why? I'm just sitting in this classroom. I'm just trying to fulfill this general education requirement so I can graduate and move on with my life. And that's real, right? We should acknowledge that those students exist, right? But if we attach a microcredential to those experiences, I think that students are going to find more meaning in them, because I think that microcredentials are going to help students articulate exactly what they got out of that experience, so that when they're finished the course, they go, oh, you know what? I did learn all of these things in this course. It wasn't just me sitting in this classroom to fulfill my gen ed requirement or my culture requirement or whatever it may be, but I did this, right? I was able to take away this competency. And I think what's cool about that and that kind of approach goes back to if you have this microcredential associated with some cultural competency, you may not find utility in that microcredential tomorrow. You might in 3 years, you might in 5 years, you might in 7, I don't know, right? I don't know where your journey is going to take you, right? But you have this microcredential now. You can use it how you would like and how it makes sense for you when it's right for you. It may not be, but you'll have that choice so that you can say, I have this particular competency. And again, my argument is that's still saying that competency and that skill is still a lot better saying, oh, I took GES 102 7 years ago in my undergrad, right? Now we can start to unpack that and you can remember that competency from when you had to take that course.
That's right. It's giving meaning and purpose and depth. So why are microcredentials important for earners? Like, what specific advantages do they offer to individuals looking to enhance their skills or advance their careers?
I think it goes back to when you leave an institution, what are you taking with you, right? When you start to go and interview for a job, right? Oftentimes it's your word, right? You start talking and you're saying, I gained X, Y, and Z things. And that's great. And that's cool. That's awesome. But wouldn't it be great if there was something, or the institution can actually back you on your claim, right? That you actually had this asset that can actually say, oh no, I am really good, or I really do have this competency, right? So I think that for earners, it is this layer of trust and verification of a competency that they currently don't have, right? That this could be a huge value add for them as they start thinking about this. I also want to recognize that life happens, right? And for students, that may mean when life happens, I need to evaluate how I'm showing up at UMBC, right? And when life happens, we know that for some students, that means I need to take a step back and I need to think about another area of my life. So with that being said, the oversimplified analogy I make is, what is a 119 credit undergraduate student? Yeah, I don't know either, because they're one credit short of their full bachelor's degree, of their full macro credential, right? So I think that the value for earners, whenever they're earning micro credentials, is to be able to take their knowledge, skills, and abilities and their broader competencies. As soon as they acquire them, they have agency to leverage them for whatever's right for them and whatever's next. They don't have to wait 4 years to be able to have this credential, to be able to do and find an internship, to apply to a different program or a different institution that may be right for them at that right time, right? But it will help them be able to, it really is agency for me, that I think that you're going to have agency about your own learning experience and what that means for you. So I think that there are so many benefits to micro-credentials for earners, but it always boils back down to me, how are we capturing what you've done and how you can talk about that and have someone standing behind you and saying, yes, I attest and affirm that you have this competency.
Ooh, that's really well said. Yeah. From an employer's perspective, Colin, what is the relevance of micro-credentials? Like, how do they impact hiring decisions and workforce development strategies?
It's interesting because so UPSIA, which is our professional organization, I don't even think the letters stand for anything anymore. I think they changed it. So it's just UPSIA, like the YMCA. The YMCA doesn't stand for anything anymore. That's UPSIA. But UPSIA did this report that is finding that pretty much it's anywhere in the ballpark of 20 to 30% year-over-year growth of employers that are saying they're interested in skills-based hiring. What we're noticing is that a lot of employers aren't walking their talk, right? So we know that, so in other words, employers are posting jobs saying, oh, we're looking for candidates with X, Y, and Z skills. And then they still default to, do you have your bachelor's degree? Do you have your master's degree? So I'm saying all of that because this has been the ask of employers of higher education forever. Like, this has been the thing that employers have been asking for, right? Okay, you got your degree, and the degree is really great as an employer because I know that you have persistence, I know that you can critically think, I know that you're in this field, right? That's all helpful for jobs for employers. But again, we know that employers have been asking, what are the niche skills that on day one you're going to have when we hire you? What are those competencies we know and can have assurance that you're going to bring to us day one on this new job, right? That has been the age-old question of employers to higher education. And now we have the mechanism to do so, right? Micro-credentials are going to be that tool that speak to employers to say the exact competencies. So what ends up happening, which is really important for our work at UMBC when we create micro-credentials, is making sure as we build out the micro-credentials, market labor data is built into the micro-credential. We do this with all of our micro-credentials so that if employers walk their talk and look at the micro-credential, they can see the skills. They can see the skills and tags, and it's speaking their language because we're using different market labor tools to be able to pull and verify what those skills and tags should be based on the learning experience. So I think that this is what employers have been looking for a long time. And I'm really excited. And I'm excited to work with employers because it's really getting out of the over-credentialing that I was talking about earlier, right? And getting at what are you really looking for, employers? And in many times it's still, don't get me wrong, many employers are still looking for bachelor's degrees and master's degrees for specific jobs, but they're really interested in making sure that you have the right skills that are going to be right for that exact position.
Yeah. Now, my last question to you, Colin. Implementing micro-credentials might seem like a significant lift for faculty and staff. Can you address this concern and explain why it isn't as burdensome as it might appear?
Yeah, I love this question. My goal and my position is to build out micro-credentials all across campus, all across our experiences, and all across our co-curricular and curricular and applied learning experiences. And I hope that because we're focused on the most nimble thing, we're focused on the competency, we're focused on the learning outcomes. It's my hope that this actually isn't as much as a lift as it may sound. And what I try to do when I work with faculty and staff, it's one of the first things that I try to assure them is that I will take the brunt labor of this, right? That's my role, is helping to turn your experiences that faculty and staff offer into micro-credentials. I need some information from you, right? I don't know everything on this campus. I know a good deal, but I don't know a lot, and I don't know everything about your particular program or your particular experience. So yeah, I need some information from you, but it's really, I look at it, my role to help build that micro-credential, to be that bridge, to understand what we're doing in the academy, and then also be able to use that Rosetta Stone and translate it for external parties, right? So that this micro-credential is going to have meaning for learners, earners, for the faculty and staff that are going to be offering them, and then again, whoever is going to be consuming micro-credentials, employers, higher ed institutions, whatever. So I really try to make the process as simple as possible and as easy as possible, because this is where we want to go. We want to support learners and acknowledge their competencies and help them build their own pathway for their own learning journey. So that's really, I'm not saying it's no work, right? But I think that the work that we do together, even if we don't end up building a micro-credential, I think and I hope that it's always making programs and experiences more thoughtful, more intentional, more rich, right? In the sense of creating learning outcomes, defining the alignment between assessment and the learning outcomes, and having learners in those experiences demonstrate that.
Yeah, it's all defining that output that you're looking for those students. And if your faculty and yourself, you look at that as the output and you're focused on that, then as a community, it's a great benefit to everybody involved. It's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Colin, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would lend value to this conversation today on microcredentialing?
There is still a lot of newness behind microcredentialing, which is both exciting, but also a little nerve-wracking, right? Because I think because of the newness, there may be some employers that aren't ready for your micro-credentials, or there are some faculty and staff that aren't ready to add micro-credentials to their programs and to their initiatives. But we're seeing a lot of emerging trends across higher education, across the learn and work ecosystem, that things are changing. It's unclear at that rate, and it's unclear about that pace. But we know that micro-credentials, with certainty almost, that this is going to be a really important part of our learn and work lives, about credentialing those competencies. So I think that UMBC is admittedly an early adopter in some of this work, but we're not alone anymore. And we know that we have partners in this work, and it's growing and it's still building and it's still iterating. So I think that that's something to consider for everybody, that I feel like I often have to explain micro-credentials, and I'll explain micro-credentials for as long as I need to. But that's because that's a growing pain still. But I do think that in 5-10 years, I won't need to explain micro-credentials anymore. I think that they will be a part of our lives in such a way that, like macro-credentials, right? That we have a conceptual understanding of what they are, how they're used, but just recognizing that we're in the process of change right now, and changing how higher education operates and how consumers of higher education credentials receive them. There's change, and that takes time and being okay with that process.
Colin, this has been a really great conversation. I'm so happy that you came on the show to explain to everybody. This was fascinating for me. I love the world of microcredentialing from what I knew of it, but wow, you just expanded my mind on it and just makes so much sense. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of UMBC's Mic'd Up podcast. We hope you enjoyed it.